Hi there. You know, the life of a nature photographer can be really quite lonely, so today I'm meeting up with fellow YouTuber Scott Tilley from Scott Tilley Photography, and I'll link his channel below. And we're going to go out to an area that we've not visited before, so we're going to go and do a little bit of exploration, see what we find. We might get some landscape shots, there's potentially some waterfalls here, we've got a reservoir, some woods and a lot of wildlife around us, so we're just going to explore, see what we find, and start to talk a little bit about what the benefits are of doing your wildlife photography with other people from time to time. So we'll crack on and meet up with you later. For the first photo of the day, there was a lovely view across the reservoir with some gorgeous colours in the trees reflecting in the water. So Scott has gone off to look at the waterfalls and get some photographs there because that's what he was drawn to. But I was really drawn to the woodland. I may regret not going with him to the waterfall because the light is beautiful at the moment, but I've come across this little collection of dead trees that are covered in moss. They're absolutely brilliant, and just photographing them close up to get a hint of the woodland that's in the background. I'll bring you over and have a look. So you can probably just see here, I've got my focus peaking switched on with manual focusing, and I've chosen an aperture of f9 because I want to blur out the back of the woods, but just to give a little hint of some of the trunks that are there. And if I turn my manual focusing ring, you can see the red dots start to disappear. So that's as the foreground is going out of focus, and now I bring it back, and the more red there is, the more it's in focus. And if I pull it nearer, they've gone again because it's too near. So get the maximum redness there. I'm going to just raise my ISO a little bit so that shadows aren't totally blown out. I've got a 5-second self timer on just to keep it as still as possible, and here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there we go. So you can probably see here just behind me there's some light kicking off in the woods, and it's just illuminating some holly that we've got. So I've just popped in there to get a couple of close-up shots of the holly leaves with some beautiful bokeh in the background, and I made a whole video about this last summer, so if you're interested in watching a bit more about that type of photography, click on the link above or in the description below. Now you see this little tree just behind me in the valley. It's been absolutely stripped, or mostly stripped, of its bark. So that's a great sign that this place has great spotted woodpeckers. Now if I was to come here regularly, I'd bring my chair hide and sit right here at the top of this hill looking out to that tree and some of the others around it and wait for those great spotted woodpeckers to come along. Now I've not got my chair hide with me today and I don't have time, but that's the kind of thing to be looking out for when you're out and about. So what I've got here on this fallen tree is what's called a polypodium fern, and it's showing some spores just on the underside of the leaf, and they're like little balls of fur. And if I bring you in closer and zoom in just a little bit, you should be able to see all these little spores. By this point, the light was getting really harsh, so I used my twin macro flash to counteract the harsh highlights and to darken the background. Okay, so we've just met up after our first stint this morning. How did you find it, Scott? What have you seen?
Really enjoyed it actually. I mean, when we split up, you said you were going to go and have a look at some wildlife, and normally that's my inclination to go looking for wildlife. But I thought I've been having a bit of a tough time with wildlife recently, and what I decided to do was go and do a bit of landscape as a bit of light relief. But I wanted to try and shoot slightly differently down here than most people normally do. Obviously, it's Wyman Brook, you get little waterfall cascades and people are taking pictures of them. So I've been there and done that, but what I've been doing mainly is shooting in black and white. So I do like to shoot in black and white sometimes and bring those contrasts out that you know, you can really play with and sort of create a route through an image for the viewer to follow. So that's what I've been doing this morning. I've really enjoyed it. I spent an inordinate amount of time at one location, up and down with the tripod, left to right by a couple of inches.
Changing compositions
and
stuff.
But yeah, it's been really good.
Brilliant. Yeah, well, I did go off to do wildlife, as you said, but I ended up getting drawn to the woodland. The light was just so beautiful when I got there, but then after a little while it got really bright, so I kind of focused on woodland small details, which is a thing I quite like to do. So that's been nice, and I think for our afternoon stint I'm going to get down to the brook and do what you were doing this morning, and maybe it'd be interesting to see how we both have a slightly different take on the same sort of stimulus. But so I think it'd be really useful or interesting for people to understand a little bit more about you. Perhaps they might not have seen your channel before. So what's Scott Tilley Photography all about?
Well, I mean, I've been shooting wildlife since about 2005, when sort of digital cameras were first coming in, and also doing landscapes as well. And then really the channel just took off because, quite surprisingly, I thought I had a bit of knowledge that might be useful to people. So I think you tend to think that you don't know an awful lot until you actually start talking to people and then find, well, actually the thing that I think is sort of common sense, they're not quite sure of. So, you know, if you can impart that across to people, then you know, that's really what the channel's about. And I try and do it in a sort of slightly light-hearted way and sort of a bit of a ramble around and throw a few tips in here and there, and just join me on a bit of an adventure, really.
Good stuff. Well, I would absolutely recommend you go and check out Scott's channel. As I said earlier, it's in the description below, and it's been really great meeting up with Scott so far, because, you know, we've got so much in common. We both shoot Sony, we both shoot mixed wildlife, nature, all sorts of stuff like that. We're both from Nottinghamshire, we're both called Scott, and it turns out that Scott's wife works around the corner from where I live. So yeah, loads in common. So it's been really good to meet another photographer for a change and spend a bit of time. Yeah. And we're going to go off this afternoon, do another session, maybe split up for a bit, and we'll come back after that and compare notes again. Apologies if the sound's not great. I've come to the brook, which is where Scott was photographing this morning, and I think sometimes with waterfall type photography it can get a bit samey. People take the same types of things. It's waterfalls for waterfall's sake. So I am going to take a classic shot of a waterfall, but then I'm going to try something different, maybe some macro waterfall shots. But firstly, my classic shot. I really want this to be a quite tight, cropped in, close image. So I'm at 135mm, and the composition I've come up with, I've got this little, well, it's a big rock in the foreground just here, and I've got all of the cascades in the immediate scene in front of me, cropped in quite closely. Now at 135mm, even if I go to f22 or something like that, I'm not going to get front to back in focus. So I'm going to take two different exposures, one focused about halfway through the scene, and that'll get the cascades, and then another one just focused on this rock, and in Photoshop I will remove that with a mask so that everything is sharp front to back. And I'm particularly picking a shutter speed that's going to let me get a little bit of motion in the water as it's coming down the cascades. So I'm currently at 1/8 of a second and a base ISO, so ISO 100. And with the light I've got this afternoon, I don't even need to use any ND filters, not even using the polarizer. So I'm guessing Scott probably would have needed to use at least the polarizer this morning because it was so bright. It's now a little bit overcast, which is great for this kind of thing. So 1/8 of a second, f13, ISO 100, focused about halfway into the scene, and here we go. So let's take a look at that. There's some wonderful movement in the water there. So all I need to do when I get back is to put the two exposures into Photoshop with a mask and bring in that in focus rock at the foreground. I've captured some really nice texture in the water to show the movement and the chaos of the splashes. The overcast conditions here allowed me to underexpose and make a really dark and moody picture. For my next shot, I chose to expose a little more brightly, but still captured all that motion in the water. I needed to go and stand in a pool of water for the next shots.
So this is a sort of experiment for me. I've not done this before, and I don't know if it'll work, but I've got my macro lens on and I'm taking some close-ups of the water as it comes over the falls, as it lands into the stream below. And the thing I'm finding most useful for focusing is to use the edge of the rock where the water comes off. It's impossible to focus on the water because it's always moving, but the rock always remains still. So using the rock as the point of focus is proving really useful. The other thing, because this water moves so incredibly fast relative to your frame of your camera, you've got to go for really high shutter speeds. So at the minute I'm shooting at 1/1600, but I've been doing some shots at 1/2000th of a second, and without that you just end up with a blurry mess.
But it proved more difficult than I thought. Most of the shots just weren't in focus, such as this example. I had more luck when photographing the water as it hit the pool below. There are some interesting shapes, but it's too much of a messy image. I think I will need my wide-angle macro lens to make the most of this kind of shot, but I didn't have it with me. But it's something to think about for next time. And as I walked away from the pool, my trousers were so soaked it looked like I'd had an accident. Even though my earlier macro waterfall shots weren't a success, I did manage to get a nice macro shot when I found this mossy rock with water running off the brook, and I captured a close-up of the water trickling off that moss. I found another close-up opportunity with this holly leaf refusing to be washed away from the rock that it was on.
Okay, so for my final shots at the waterfalls, I'm finishing off with a little bit of fun, and I'm using my Lensbaby Omni Creative filters. Now, I've made a video on these before, and there's a link above and in the description below if you find that useful. But particularly, I'm enjoying using the triangular prism and the rainbow film. And I'm just going to pop that in front of the scene, and that is looking nice. Let's take a picture. And it's as easy as that. But the film that I've made before, the video that I've made before, covers each of the filters from two of the kits in detail.
And so here are some of my favourite shots with these creative filters. It might not be serious nature photography, but these filters are great fun to use. Okay, Scott, how did you get on in the afternoon session?
Struggled this afternoon. I think because it's a new site for us both, to try and do wildlife rather than, it's okay if all you're going for is snaps, but when you're trying to produce something a little bit more than that, I think you really need to do more than one visit. So I've took it really as a little bit of a learning experience this afternoon. I've found one or two places, seen a few field signs that let me know that stuff is in the area, and also sort of made a mental note of places that I want to come back to probably another 2 or 3 months down the line when I think it'll be a better opportunity for stuff. But yeah, it's a really interesting place. Really enjoyed it. Enjoyed this morning as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't been near wildlife all day, or I haven't taken any photos of wildlife all day, which is it's really surprising myself with that. But I've had such a great time at the other places. In the afternoon, I went back to the brook that you were at this morning and tried various things there. Some sort of classic slow shutter stuff, macro, creative things. So not sure what's worked. It'll be interesting to see when I get home and get the images up on the computer. But it's been a really interesting experience. It's really nice to meet up, because normally when I do these things I'm out on my own, and it's been great to kind of swap ideas and swap things that you've seen and I've seen, and information. So that's been really good.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like you, I'm often hours and hours out on my own, and I don't particularly mind that, but sometimes it just does help to be out with somebody else. It makes a nice change, and to you know, as you say, swap ideas. And sometimes somebody else will come up with something that you're so blinkered on what you're doing you've never even thought of, and it just jogs you to actually lift your game and swap 1 or 2 things around. So it's been really useful for me. I've picked up 1 or 2 things from you today as well. So
yeah, it's been absolutely great for that. And please do head over and check out Scott's channel. He's got loads and loads of videos, and I'm sure you'll find things in there that will be useful to you. There's stuff even beyond nature photography. There's bits of astro and vintage lenses and all sorts of stuff. So real good place for information on photography in general. So this has been a new experience for me, because I've been at a new place for the first time, and I've made a video before with some tips for great things to do when you visit locations for the first time. So if you'd like to check out that, you can see it here. But thank you very much for watching, and until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.